There was a time when sandwiches weren't just quick meals, they were traditions, passed down through generations, packed into school tins, wrapped in wax paper for long train journeys. But today, many of those once-loved British sandwiches have quietly disappeared. Not because they weren't good, but because the world changed. Tastes evolved, convenience took over, and somewhere along the way, these simple, humble creations were forgotten. Some of them might sound strange now, some surprisingly delicious, and a few you may wish had stayed buried. So today, we're stepping back into a different Britain. A Britain of tea rooms, factory lunches, seaside picnics, and sandwiches no one talks about anymore. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, which sandwich from your childhood do you miss the most? Number 1. The dripping sandwich. Before butter was affordable, before spreads filled supermarket shelves, there was something far simpler. Hot meat fat, soaked in a cold bread. And for millions of Britons, it wasn't a last resort. It was a treat. The dripping sandwich was born in the kitchens of working-class Britain, especially during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. After a Sunday roast, families would collect the leftover beef fat, known as dripping, and store in jars. As it cooled, it thickened into a rich, savory spread. Nothing was wasted. Every scrap had value. By the time of the World Wars and the rationing years that followed, butter was scarce and expensive. Dripping became an everyday substitute, spread thickly on a bread, sometimes with a pinch of salt. For many, this wasn't just food, it was comfort, a reminder of a proper meal in hard times. It was cheap, filling, and packed with flavor. Workers heading to factories or long shifts would carry dripping sandwiches wrapped in paper, simple fuel for demanding days. In a world without excess, richness came from ingenuity. Today, the idea of eating cold animal fat on bread might seem unthinkable, even unappetizing. But back then, it symbolized warmth, family, and survival. What we now turn away from once brought people together around the table. And if dripping represented making the most of leftovers, the next sandwich took simplicity even further, turning just sugar and bread into something children would never forget. Number 2. Sugar sandwich. It sounds almost too simple to be real. Just sugar pressed between slices of bread. But for a generation of children, this was pure happiness. The sugar sandwich rose to prominence during the harsh years of wartime and post-war Britain, especially throughout the 1940s and early 1950s. With strict rationing in place, luxuries like chocolate, jam, and even butter were limited or unavailable. Families had to stretch what little they had. Sugar, though rationed, was often one of the few sweet ingredients still accessible. Combined with bread, and sometimes a thin scraping of margarine, it became a quick and easy treat. For children growing up in those austere times, the sugar sandwich wasn't just food, it was a rare moment of joy. It was something mothers could prepare quickly, something affordable, and something that tasted like a small escape from everyday hardship. Sweetness, in a time of scarcity, carried emotional weight. It meant comfort. It meant care. Today, with endless options of snacks and desserts, it's hard to imagine craving something so plain. But back then, that crunch of sugar between soft bread felt like a luxury. What we might now dismiss once felt like a celebration. And for those who wanted to take that sweetness just a little further, they found a way with fruit that was just as simple, but twice as satisfying. Number 3. Banana and sugar sandwich. Soft, sweet, and almost dessert-like. This was the sandwich that blurred the line between meal and treat. Bananas, once considered an exotic import, became more widely available in Britain during the mid-20th century. As supply chains improved after the war, this affordable fruit quickly found its way into homes across the country. Paired with sugar and layered into bread, it became a popular option for families looking to create something both filling and sweet without spending much. The banana and sugar sandwich became a staple in school lunchboxes throughout the 1950s and 60s. It was soft, easy to eat, and required no cooking. For parents, it was practical. For children, it felt indulgent. The natural sweetness of bananas combined with added sugar created a comforting, almost pudding-like experience, something that stood out in otherwise modest meals. But like many simple pleasures, it slowly faded away. As more processed snacks and spreads entered the market, this humble combination was left behind. What once felt special became too ordinary for a changing world. While some sandwiches leaned into sweetness, others embraced bold, salty flavors that defined an entirely different kind of British taste. Number 4. Corned beef and brown sauce. Salty, tangy, unmistakably strong. This was not a sandwich for the faint of heart. Corned beef, preserved in tins, became a household staple during wartime Britain and remained popular well into the post-war decades. Imported in large quantities, it was affordable, long-lasting, and easy to store. Paired with brown sauce, a sharp, vinegar-based condiment, it created a sandwich that packed a powerful punch of flavor. It was especially common among working-class families and factory workers. This sandwich was all about practicality and taste. It required no cooking, could be assembled quickly, and provided a satisfying, protein-rich meal. The richness of the corned beef, combined with the tangy kick of brown sauce, made it memorable, something that stood out in a time when variety was limited. But over time, taste began to change. Processed meats like corned beef lost their appeal, replaced by fresher, more modern options. What was once a lunchtime favorite became a reminder of a tougher, more industrial past. And if corned beef was bold and unmistakable, the next sandwich was something else entirely. A spread so mysterious, people still debate what's really inside it. Number 5. Potted meat sandwich. It came in small jars with a texture you couldn't quite describe, and a flavor you never forgot. Potted meat has a long history in Britain, dating back centuries as a way to preserve leftover meats. By the 20th century, it had become a mass-produced staple, sold in small jars and tins. Made from finely ground meat mixed with fat, spices, and preservatives, it was designed to be cheap, spreadable, and long-lasting. Brands filled pantry shelves, making it a convenient option for quick meals. For busy households and working families, potted meat was incredibly practical. It required no preparation, just open, spread, and eat. It became a common feature in sandwiches, especially for packed lunches. Its rich, savory taste made it satisfying, even if its exact ingredients were often unclear. And perhaps that mystery is part of why it faded away. As people became more conscious of what they were eating, potted meat began to feel questionable. What was once convenient and comforting slowly became something people avoided. But if potted meat raised questions, the next sandwich pushed boundaries even further, featuring a cut of meat few would dare to try today. Number 6. Tongue sandwich, ox tongue. It was tender, it was expensive, and it came from a part of the animal most people today would never consider eating. Ox tongue was once a prized delicacy in Britain, especially during the Victorian era and well into the early 20th century. Sold salted or cured, it was often boiled, peeled, and sliced thinly. Unlike many cuts of meat, tongue was seen as refined, something served at proper dinners or layered carefully into sandwiches for special occasions. Butchers proudly displayed it, and households treated it with respect. This wasn't everyday food. It was a sign of quality. Tongue was tender, flavorful, and surprisingly versatile. In sandwiches, it offered a smooth texture and rich taste that felt luxurious compared to simpler fillings. It was common in picnics, afternoon teas, and even railway journeys where a proper sandwich mattered. But over time, something changed. As food culture shifted, people grew uncomfortable with the idea of eating visible animal parts. What was once elegant became unsettling. Today, the thought alone is enough to turn many away. And while tongue once represented refinement, the next sandwich was far more humble, yet just as unforgettable in its own way. Number 7. Fish paste sandwich. It came in tiny jars, spread in seconds, and filled homes with a smell you either loved or never forgot. Fish paste sandwiches became a staple in mid-20th century Britain, especially during and after World War II. Varieties like salmon, anchovy, and shrimp paste were widely available, affordable, and easy to store. These spreads required no preparation, making them ideal for quick lunches or afternoon tea. Convenience was everything. With busy households and limited resources, fish paste offered a fast, flavorful option. It became a tea-time classic, often paired with thin slices of bread and butter. For many, it was a taste of routine, something familiar, dependable, and always within reach. But as fresh food became more accessible, these processed spreads began to lose their charm. The strong smell, once comforting, became off-putting. What people once relied on daily quietly disappeared from their tables. And if fish paste was about convenience, the next sandwich was about simplicity at its purest form. Number 8. Lettuce and salad cream. No meat, no cheese, just crisp lettuce and a generous drizzle of something unmistakably British. The lettuce and salad cream sandwich rose to popularity in the mid-20th century, particularly in post-war Britain. Salad cream, a tangy, slightly sweet dressing, was a household staple long before mayonnaise became widespread. Combined with fresh lettuce, it created a light, refreshing sandwich that required minimal ingredients. This was a sandwich of balance. Crisp, cool lettuce paired with the bold, creamy acidity of salad cream. It was cheap, easy to make, and ideal for summer lunches or afternoon tea. For many families, it offered a refreshing alternative to heavier, meat-based options. But as global flavors entered British kitchens, salad cream began to lose its place. Replaced by mayonnaise and more complex dressings, this once-beloved combination started to feel outdated. What was once refreshing became forgettable. But while some sandwiches were light and delicate, others were anything but subtle. Number 9. Chip Buddy. Hot chips. Thick bread. Butter melting into every corner. This wasn't just a sandwich. It was an experience. The chip buddy has long been a symbol of Northern England, deeply rooted in working-class culture. Traditionally, it wasn't the neat version you might see today. It was thick-cut bread, heavily buttered, stuffed with chunky, freshly fried chips, often straight from the chippy. Sometimes it was finished with salt, vinegar, or a splash of sauce. This was comfort food at its peak. Cheap, filling, and incredibly satisfying. For laborers, it provided the energy needed for long, physically demanding days. It wasn't about presentation. It was about substance. Every bite was warm, soft, and indulgent. The chip buddy still exists, but not like it used to. Modern versions are cleaner, lighter, missing the excess that made it iconic. What was once gloriously messy has been tamed by changing tastes. And from something heavy and indulgent, we move to a sandwich that once defined elegance and restraint. Number 10. Egg and cress sandwich. Delicate, neat, almost too perfect. This was the sandwich that turned simplicity into sophistication. The egg and cress sandwich became a staple of British tea rooms and afternoon gatherings throughout the 20th century. Made with hard-boiled eggs, mayonnaise or salad cream, and fresh cress, it was often served on soft white bread with the crust removed. It became closely associated with traditional afternoon tea culture. This sandwich represented refinement. It was light, balanced, and visually appealing. The peppery bite of cress paired beautifully with the creamy egg filling, creating a flavor that felt both simple and elevated. It was a favorite at social gatherings, from garden parties to formal teas. But even classics can fade. As modern sandwiches grew bolder and more diverse, the egg and cress quietly slipped into the background. What once symbolized British elegance became something rarely chosen. And as tastes continued to evolve, the next sandwich tells a story not of elegance, but of survival, endurance, and a single name that defined an era. Number 11. Spam sandwich. It came in a tin, lasted for years, and for an entire generation, it was impossible to escape. Spam became a defining food of Britain during World War II and the years that followed. Imported in massive quantities, this canned processed meat was one of the few reliable protein sources available during rationing. Fresh meat was scarce, heavily controlled, and often out of reach for ordinary families. Spam, on the other hand, was accessible, affordable, and endlessly versatile. For many households, spam wasn't a choice, it was a necessity. Fried, sliced, or eaten cold in sandwiches, it became a daily staple. Packed into lunchboxes and served at dinner tables, it kept families fed during some of the hardest years in modern history. It symbolized survival. But once rationing ended, people moved on quickly. Spam, once essential, became a reminder of hardship and monotony. What once kept people alive became something they no longer wanted to remember. And while Spam told a story of endurance, the next sandwich carried the bold, unmistakable taste of the sea. Number 12. Sardine and tomato sandwich. Strong, oily, unapologetically bold. This was a sandwich that didn't try to please everyone. Sardines, often sold in tins, were a common feature in British households throughout the 20th century, especially in coastal communities. Combined with fresh slices of tomato, they created a sandwich that was both nutritious and affordable. It required no cooking and could be prepared in minutes. This sandwich offered something different: richness from the sardines and freshness from the tomatoes. It was packed with flavor and nutrients, making it a practical choice for families looking to make the most of simple ingredients. For many, it became a regular part of lunch routines. But as time passed, its strong smell and oily texture became less appealing to newer generations. What once felt hearty and satisfying began to feel overwhelming and outdated. And if sardines brought intensity, the next sandwich was built from something even simpler: yesterday's leftovers. Number 13. Cold sausage sandwich. No frying, no reheating, just yesterday's sausages straight into bread. In households where nothing was wasted, leftovers played an important role. Cold sausage sandwiches became a practical solution for using up uneaten food from the previous day. Whether from breakfast or dinner, sausages were sliced or placed whole between bread, often with a bit of mustard or sauce. This sandwich was all about efficiency. It saved time, reduced waste, and provided a filling meal without any extra effort. For busy families and workers heading out early, it was a reliable option: simple, hearty, and ready to go. Today, the idea of eating cold sausages might not appeal to everyone. But back then, it was completely normal, a reflection of a mindset where practicality came before preference. What feels unusual now once felt entirely natural. And if cold sausages were about making do, the next sandwich stripped things down even further, to something almost unthinkably basic. Number 14. Bread and dripping with salt. No extras, no garnish. Just bread, fat, and a pinch of salt. Even simpler than the dripping sandwich, this version removed everything unnecessary. Common in working-class homes during times of extreme frugality, it relied solely on leftover animal fat and basic bread. Salt was sometimes added to enhance the flavor, but beyond that, there was nothing more. This was survival food in its purest form. It provided energy, warmth, and sustenance when options were limited. For those who lived through difficult economic periods, it wasn't about taste, it was about getting through the day. Looking back, it's hard to imagine relying on something so minimal. Yet for many, this was a daily reality. What seems stark and unappealing today once meant the difference between hunger and survival. But not all simple sandwiches were so plain. Some delivered a sharp, unforgettable kick. Number 15. Pickled onion sandwich. One bite, and you knew instantly. Sharp, sour, impossible to ignore. Pickling has long been a part of British food culture, used to preserve vegetables for extended periods. Pickled onions, stored in jars of vinegar, became a common household item. Layered into sandwiches, they created a bold, tangy filling that required little else. This sandwich stood out for its intensity. The strong vinegar flavor cut through the simplicity of bread, creating something memorable and satisfying. It was cheap, long-lasting, and easy to prepare, ideal for quick meals or packed lunches. But strength was also its downfall. As taste shifted toward milder, more balanced flavors, the pickled onion sandwich began to fade. What once excited the palate became too overpowering for modern preferences. And if pickled onions pushed the limits of flavor, the next sandwich took a very different approach. blending sweet and savory in a way that still divides opinion today. Number 16. Jam and cheese sandwich. Sweet and savory in the same bite. To some, it was perfection. To others, completely unthinkable. The jam and cheese sandwich dates back to a time when British meals were shaped more by availability than strict culinary rules. In the early to mid-20th century, households often combined whatever ingredients they had on hand. Cheese was a common staple, and jam, especially homemade, was widely available. Putting them together wasn't unusual. It was simply practical. This combination offered contrast. The saltiness of the cheese balanced the sweetness of the jam, creating a surprisingly rich flavor. For many families, it was a quick way to make a filling sandwich without needing meat. It also reflected a broader British tradition of mixing sweet and savory elements, something seen in many classic dishes. Today, this pairing often raises eyebrows. Modern tastes tend to separate sweet from savory, making this once normal sandwich feel strange. What was once creative and comforting now feels confusing to many. But while some combinations surprised the palate, others were deeply rooted in regional tradition. Number 17. Peas pudding sandwich. Bright yellow, thick, almost paste-like. This was a sandwich that belonged to the North. Peas pudding, made from boiled split peas, has been a staple in northern England for centuries. Traditionally served alongside meats like ham, it eventually found its way into sandwiches as a hearty, affordable filling. Its roots go back to a time when simple, plant-based foods formed the backbone of everyday diets. This sandwich was filling, nutritious, and inexpensive. In industrial regions, where workers needed sustaining meals, peas pudding provided energy without costing much. Its smooth texture and mild flavor made it easy to eat, even if it wasn't the most visually appealing option. Today, outside of a few traditional spots, it's rarely seen in sandwiches. Changing tastes and modern convenience foods pushed it aside. What once fed entire communities is now largely forgotten. And from something thick and hearty, we moved to a sandwich that was light, but carried a surprising bite. Number 18. Cucumber and vinegar sandwich. Cool, crisp cucumber, soaked in sharp vinegar. A refreshing idea with a hidden edge. While cucumber sandwiches are still associated with British tea culture, earlier versions were often far more acidic. Instead of delicate butter or mild spreads, slices of cucumber were dressed with vinegar, creating a sharper, more intense flavor. This style was especially common in simpler households where ingredients were kept minimal. It was refreshing and easy to prepare. The vinegar added a tangy kick that elevated the otherwise plain cucumber, making it more exciting. In warm weather, it offered a cooling, light meal that didn't require cooking. Over time, the sharpness was softened. Modern versions replaced vinegar with butter or creamier elements, making them more refined. What was once bold and tangy became gentle and polite. But if vinegar added a bite, the next sandwich challenged something deeper: texture itself. Number 19. Tripe sandwich. Chewy, unusual, and for many today, almost impossible to imagine eating. Tripe, made from the lining of a cow's stomach, was once a common ingredient in British cooking, especially among working-class communities. It was inexpensive and widely available, often sold pre-cooked and ready to eat. Layered into sandwiches, it provided a source of protein in times when options were limited. This was food shaped by necessity. Tripe was affordable and filling, making it a practical choice for families trying to stretch their budgets. For those accustomed to it, the texture and flavor were familiar, even comforting. But as living standards improved, people began to move away from such cuts. The idea of eating tripe became less appealing, even taboo for some. What once symbolized resourcefulness came to represent a past many wanted to leave behind. And if tripe pushed the limits of texture, the next sandwich returned to something simpler. Number 20. Cold bacon fat sandwich. Leftover grease, cold bread, and a richness you could taste in every bite. After a traditional British breakfast, bacon fat was rarely thrown away. Instead, it was saved and reused, often spread directly on a bread once it had cooled. In times when every bit of food mattered, this practice turned leftovers into a quick and satisfying meal. This sandwich was all about flavor and energy. The fat carried the smoky essence of bacon, creating a rich, savory taste that lingered. For workers and families alike, it was a way to get the most out of what they had. Nothing wasted, everything valued. Today, with growing awareness around health and diet, the idea of eating pure bacon fat feels excessive, even unhealthy. But back then, it was normal, another example of how necessity shaped taste. What once felt satisfying now feels indulgent in a very different way. And as these rich, heavy flavors began to fade, the next sandwich takes us in a completely different direction, towards something smaller, sharper, and surprisingly refined. Number 21. Anchovy paste sandwich. Tiny fish crushed into a paste, and somehow, it became a symbol of elegance. Anchovy paste sandwiches were once a staple of upper and middle-class British tea culture, particularly in the early 20th century. Sold in small jars or tubes, anchovy paste was easy to spread and packed with intense flavor. It was often served on thin slices of buttered bread, sometimes with the crust removed as part of a refined afternoon tea. This sandwich represented sophistication. Its strong, salty taste was seen as refined rather than overwhelming, especially when balanced with butter. It was served in drawing rooms and tea salons, places where presentation and tradition mattered just as much as flavor. But as food culture evolved, its intensity became less appealing. Modern tastes leaned toward milder, more accessible flavors. What once signaled refinement slowly became too sharp for the mainstream. And from something small and salty, we turned to a sandwich that was fresh, crisp, and quietly sweet. Number 22. Apple sandwich. Crisp apples. A sprinkle of sugar. Simple ingredients, yet surprisingly memorable. In many British households, especially during times of limited resources, fruit became a creative addition to everyday meals. Apples, widely available and affordable, were sliced thin and layered into sandwiches, often with a touch of sugar to enhance their natural sweetness. This sandwich offered something different, freshness. The crunch of the apple contrasted with the softness of the bread, creating a texture that stood out. It was light, easy to prepare, and ideal for children's lunches or quick snacks. But as more processed snacks and sweet spreads entered the market, this natural simplicity began to fade. What once felt refreshing and clever became too plain for modern tastes. And if apples brought freshness, the next sandwich added richness, in a way that was uniquely British. Number 23. Cheese savory sandwich. Old recipe. Creamy, tangy, slightly crunchy. This was not the cheese sandwich you know today. The original cheese savory sandwich was a northern British favorite, especially popular in the mid-20th century. Made with grated cheese, salad cream, and finely chopped vegetables like carrots, onions, or celery, it created a rich, textured filling. Unlike modern versions, it often had a stronger, sharper flavor. This sandwich was a perfect blend of affordability and taste. It used simple ingredients, but combined them in a way that felt indulgent. It became a staple in local bakeries and home kitchens, offering something more exciting than plain cheese. Over time, recipes changed. Flavors were toned down, textures simplified. The bold, distinctive version that once stood out slowly disappeared into a milder, more uniform alternative. And from carefully mixed fillings, we returned to something far more practical, a sandwich born from yesterday's meal. Number 24. Minced beef sandwich, cold leftovers. Dinner the next day, pressed between slices of bread. In households where waste was never an option, leftover minced beef from dishes like cottage pie or stews was often repurposed into sandwiches. Once cooled, it could be easily spread or layered into bread, creating a quick and filling meal without any extra cooking. This sandwich was about resourcefulness. It allowed families to stretch meals further, saving both time and money. For workers and children alike, it provided a hearty, protein-rich option that was ready to go. Today, leftovers are often reheated or discarded. The idea of eating cold minced beef in a sandwich feels unusual to many. But back then, it was simply part of everyday life, a reflection of a mindset where nothing was wasted. And as we reach the end of our journey, the final sandwich brings us back to something sweet, simple, indulgent, and unforgettable. Number 25. Bread and condensed milk sandwich. Sticky, sweet, almost like a dessert. This was a sandwich that felt like a secret treat. Condensed milk, with its thick texture and intense sweetness, became widely available in Britain during the 20th century. Originally used as a preserved dairy product, it quickly found its way into desserts and eventually into sandwiches. Spread generously onto bread, it created a simple yet indulgent snack. For many children, this was a rare delight. It required no preparation and delivered an immediate burst of sweetness. In a time when sugary treats were limited, it felt special, something to look forward to. But like many overly sweet foods, it fell out of favor as diets changed and options expanded. What once felt like a luxury became too rich, too excessive for everyday life. Smooth transition to outro. And with that final bite, we've traveled through a Britain that feels both distant and strangely familiar. These sandwiches weren't just meals. They were moments. They tell the story of a Britain shaped by hardship, creativity, and tradition. A time when nothing was wasted, when simplicity defined flavor, and when even the humblest ingredients could mean everything. Today, they may seem unusual, even forgotten, but for those who lived it, these were the tastes of childhood, of family, of survival, and perhaps of a world we'll never quite see again. If you enjoyed this journey through time, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the World Tapestry, where every story is a thread in the fabric of our past.